St. Michael's actually taught us to be brave. St. Michael's actually taught us the difference between right and wrong. St. Michael's actually taught us that it's okay to have a voice as a girl. We used to have debates with the Salesian boys, and we used to look forward to that. Because half the time, Elias, we did beat you at those debates. So it actually built the confidence in us as girls, as well, going out into the world. I think also, as much as we looked at the nuns and we said, this is something that we would never go into, we also had role models in them in the following manner. These were people who would work hard, who didn't look for somebody else to come through to assist them in doing what needed to be done for the school. They found the solutions. And at that point, we might have taken it for granted, but by just observing that and looking at them as role models, I can confirm that for me, it definitely did make a difference in my life. Because now when people actually ask, why is it that you would not worry about how is it that you are able to do what you do? The simple response is that if you've been raised in an environment where you do believe that you can actually do everything that you set yourself out to do, then you will achieve what needs to be achieved. Because you haven't actually set those barriers for yourself where you think it is not possible to do something, or you're always waiting for somebody else to do something on your behalf. We watched them do all that needed to be done for the school and for us, as well. And that made a big difference in my life. St. Michael's was also a school where it wasn't just about nuns. We had a lot of South African teachers present at the school itself. Very good role models. And the strange thing is that it was only years later. For example, our priest at the time was Father Hooper. I think today, there is recognition of Father Larry. But we had a priest who was Father Hooper at our school. Okay? And when I arrived, by the way, because the Mtetwa girls already come through the school, he was like, oh, not another Mtetwa girl. I hope you're going to behave better. And I hope I did better. Because in all, I was forced. I think I was forced initially, but I still appreciated that. I was one of those, that ended up being a server for a number of years, a head server in the church. And incidentally, I still do a lot of work, in the church, even though I felt I needed to take a break at some point. But the reason why I mentioned Father Hooper is that we, at that time we thought this was an ordinary priest. But we also thought these nuns and the priest around St. Michael's are very strange. Because now and again we'd see strange people in the school who come in for like 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 3 months, and then they're gone. And it was only later or very recently that we discovered that they were playing their role as well, not just in terms of educating us as girls, but they also played a very major role in the struggle. Because those people that used to come in and would find ourselves with them, even assisting us in the church, were actually people who were running away or on transit to another country as part of the struggle. And we didn't know that, because life actually carried on at the high school, and they just seemed normal to all of us. Now, why am I going on about St. Michael's and the values that it instilled in me in particular? I think that for me it is important because I just wanted to make the point that in connecting the religion to politics is that later in life, or in the environment that I found myself in, I might have gotten away with it in the first years of my career, but later in my career, I did actually realize that more and more you move into the more senior positions, I suddenly realized that this was an environment that was highly political in its nature. So I look at religion and I say, how did it actually help me, or not help me, to prepare me for that space? The one, I think that it prepared me as an individual to be able to believe that I could do anything that I wanted to do. It prepared me as an individual to make sure, to understand that it was through hard work that you can actually succeed, and being focused and making sure that you try to the best of your ability to do things as honestly as you can. I do have a criticism of religion though, because in the space that I worked in, I found that religion had not prepared me for the environment where they'd become so highly political. And what do I mean? I mean by that, for me, I mean personally, two reasons. One is that, if you've been brought up from a religious background, we're brought up to believe that everybody's good, that every one of us works for the good, of ourselves and the people, around us. And that it's very rare. We only know of one person, Satan, eh? And we thought Satan was just one person, yeah, who was like far away, and all you needed to do to keep Satan away from your door is to make sure that you continue to be on your knees and pray, every single day. But you suddenly go into the real world, and especially if it is a highly political world, and you suddenly realize, oh my gosh, this is different. I don't know, Father Chikane, maybe you have a different view on this. But for me, it was a shock and an adjustment to come into an environment where suddenly people believe, or there are people who believe that in order to get ahead, you have to stab people in the back. We're not prepared for that. Definitely, I was not prepared for that from the background in which I was raised for. So that's the one area that I can actually criticize in relation to religion. But I'd also say there is a positive in religion in the space that I find myself in, especially for those who are South Africans and understand what is going on in South Africa. It may not be very different, as well, in Swaziland. But where I find that people on a daily basis are challenged in doing the right thing. And I've been amazed by the number of people who find it so difficult to stick to their principles. And they think it is okay, that they don't have a choice, but they have to do what I'm pretty sure they also understand is wrong. And they think that they should do that in order to be able to get ahead and do what they want to actually achieve in life. And for that, I'm grateful for that religious background. Because as one friend also just described me even this morning, says, oh yes, Caesar, and remember that you're very rigid, okay? Someone might describe me as rigid. I don't describe myself as rigid. But at the same time, I know what is right, I know what is wrong. I also know that basically you can walk away, and that it's so important to make sure that you stick to your principles. And instead, I struggle to understand why other people, or have struggled for a very long time to understand why other people are not like that. Because for me, I just take it for granted. It should be so obvious that you know the difference between right and wrong. And that when you can see that you're being led down the wrong path, that you should be brave enough to walk away and say, it's not for me. But that's not the case. So I took it for granted. And wondered why not everybody around me, except for probably the ones that I grew up with and was raised in the same way, actually understood and behaved in the same way. And that's why I do have that appreciation now for that religious background, because I might have been I won't say the best student, I was a good student, but not the most well-behaved student. At high school, I might have not truly appreciated at the time, what was being taught, to us as the St. Michael's girls. And what I'm talking about is not your academic studies only, but the values that were being instilled. But today, I stand back and I appreciate that what actually has helped to shape this individual that stands in front of you today is that strong religious background.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We gave an undertaking that she won't have to answer questions. So she agitates, and she may sit down and allow us to have a conversation. But just to prompt her a few other points out of what she did, and then we come back to the floor. I need to just ask you. You mentioned something about what your training didn't prepare you for. And now we have today religion being what it is.
Yeah.
And just mindful of the many denominations and the many slants of the same denomination, do you think we stand a chance of getting out of religion to face the problems we are up against today, the way maybe in your time religion was able to?
Yeah, let me answer this way. In fact, I forgot because I actually did want to actually touch on this. So, I mean, typical of mothers, I mean, I have a boy and a girl, and especially, I mean, for the girl, she didn't like the fact that I wanted to take her to an all-girls Anglican school, because I am Anglican, but I forced it. I forced, to actually take her to that school, because for me, I thought it was important. And the importance was really that I wanted her to still grow up in an environment hopefully similar to the one that I grew up in, because, as I said, later in life, you suddenly realize how important, it is. I do think it's very disappointing, though, in this day and age, because I think, for me, the religious institutions of the past are very different from what it is today. And I know that part of it is actually driven, or I seem to believe that part of it is actually driven by, everybody should have more rights, let me put it this way, in terms of more freedom. We talk about, the more we become freer, there should be more rights that are provided to all of us. And I think that's good and that's positive on the one level. But I worry that, probably we've gone too far. Because when I took her to that school, it was for a particular purpose in terms of instilling values. I think they did relatively well, having said that. But it was definitely not what I went through, as an experience. And I then also have a problem. I'm sorry, for the press that are in the room, today. But I truly believe that the church is no longer playing the role that it should be playing at all. Even if now churches, if anything, I think you have to choose your church so carefully. In the past, we used to take it for granted. Church was where basically you went and you got to spend time with people who would uplift you, and it was all about positivity and, how do we actually build and take care of each other. The Anglican prayer book says, the first thing is to love, God, and the second is to love your neighbor. But all of it is about love and promoting, love. Today, that's not the case. Hey, if we look, at the churches, as our Victor actually indicated, you have to choose carefully, because it seems like religion is being used for something which is completely foreign and different from what it was doing, previously. It's like people want to be associated with the churches where it's about who attends their church and how much money do they have. And I go to this particular church because this is where I interact with these individuals. Yeah. So it's no longer, what I know and understood of in the past. And it is so sad, because I think that I don't know, I have a sense that soon there'll be no place for religion if we're not very careful.
Okay, when you were at St. Michael's, because I keep comparing you to Elias, because he wrote in his book how he now in hindsight appreciates how some guys could move from Ireland, facing their own political complications, and come here and then sacrifice so much in a, if you like, in a foreign country, on a foreign continent altogether. But then I look back and I say, but by the way, what was the political agenda of religion in the way it spread? Now I'm talking about it out of that context, outside of that context. Were you mindful of any agenda of the missionaries at the time?
I don't know about other people, I can only talk about my experience. And I was not mindful of any alternative agenda except for them having come through here to give of themselves as much as possible, yeah, and to educate to expose us, as girls, to the world, and to increase the belief, in self. And as I said, of course, now you actually realize that they were even playing a much bigger role, which was, being part of the struggle, effectively, as well, but with us not being aware of it. And I'm assuming that the question that you're asking is geared to basically say, was it actually driven towards trying to brainwash us in terms of how we think and behave? I think not. So yesterday when we were having a conversation, I think that we even mentioned that at St. Michael's there was even a year where something really odd actually happened. Where all of a sudden we had girls dropping and telling us that they now can speak in tongues, okay? And it was really just, I'm going to say hilarious. It wasn't hilarious at the time, okay? Because we just could not understand where that came from. And I can tell you that the nuns and everybody did not appreciate what was actually happening, because that's not what they were trying to actually promote. It was about basically how do you actually use those religious values and so forth to build you as a better human being that's going to try and make a difference in the world, much like they were trying to make a difference. But if you ask me as a person who spent so many years at a religious school, I'll tell you today that I cannot claim to know the Bible.
Sure.
I still have to go and page through and say, okay, where's James and where's Esther and so forth. So it wasn't teachings strictly on the Bible. Yeah? Which is, I think, maybe different from other people's experiences, where basically it was the Bible says this and therefore you shall not. It was definitely not that type of setup.
You work in a highly regulated industry, aviation, where we know IATA can take your license, and we have order in aviation. If you just consider how many flights take off every second all over the world, it would be chaos if we didn't have that regulation. Is there a chance that religion is far too unregulated? That because, we can't judge others, only God can judge. Do you believe uNkulunkulu maybe should appoint an IATA and say, listen? No, seriously though. Just so we can know these crooks that I can call crooks, downright crooks, can be taken somewhere and be held accountable the way an airline can be taken to IATA. So at least we can stabilize and have some, because otherwise I suspect with people eating snakes, drinking diesel, this is the rapture as we know it, right? Do you think that we should regulate just to save us from ourselves?
No, I think that at the moment it feels like, we have no choice, to regulate, but I don't believe that was the purpose of, religion, to actually find ourselves being regulated. But, obviously, as you mentioned, right now, because there are churches where people are being given dog food to eat and told, yes, possibly we find ourselves where there probably has to be a little bit of regulation. But then for me, this is where I have a bit of a problem, because I'm saying if you start to actually regulate religion, what is then religion all about? There's a bigger problem, and I don't think it has to do with religion in terms of why people find themselves falling into the trap of believing that if they eat dog meat, they will be saved. And maybe that's where what we should be paying attention, to, and going back, to the old school religion in terms of making sure that people understand, what religion is all about and what was the real purpose of religion. It's gone,
what problem is that you're saying?
Well, look, the fact of the matter is that in a lot of instances when people do that, it's because they don't have anything else to hold on to or to believe in. Yeah? So, and everybody looks, people are living in poverty, and a lot of those church leaders attract those individuals on the basis of saying, if you eat this, life will get better, for you, which is not true. We're human beings, people are human, we're all striving to at least put food, on our table. And I think for me that's the bigger problem that we need to actually solve. Where people now are taking advantage and using religion to take advantage of simple and underprivileged individuals.
All right,